Greetings once again from Santa Rosa, California. Our ministry, Revelation 14:1, dedicated to writing the truths of the Bible. We understand that Christianity of today has been flooded with false teachings, ones that were carried forward from the past and others that were introduced cleverly by the disciples of Satan himself. We have been touching on most of these topics that we have been taught since our childhood and have come to believe, and it's very difficult for us to change our mind to come to believe that what we had believed in the past was not the right thing. Today we continue with prophecy about this land that we live in, USA of today, the 6th day of January 2018. Sixth day of January 2018. So our topic today is a continuation of what we've been studying last week. Revelation chapter 13, the two beasts that this chapter describes. The first beast that came out of the waters, out of a populated area, and the second beast that came out of the earth. It was a lamb-like beast which began to speak like a dragon. We came to identify that beast as the United States of America. So we have been, we've seen some of the truths in that. We found out too from that prophecy that in 1844 was the end of the 2,300-day prophecy. 1844, from 457 to 1844. And that was the end of the 2,300-day prophecy. Within that time period lies the 1,260-day prophecy, which is from 538 to 1798. 538, when the Emperor of Rome gave the civil power to the papal system. That was in 538. Justinian was the emperor then. And then the papal system had both the religious power and the civil power. And from 538 to 1798 was called the Dark Ages. During this time, the church-state government persecuted the true Christians of that time. So that was the legacy of that power. The first beast that came out of the seas, out of the populated area, which was Europe. The second beast, which came out of an empty land, it said it came out of the earth. So the opposite of seas is earth. So the opposite of a populated area is a vacant land. The United States was a vacant land, occupied only by the indigenous people of the land. And when they fled the persecution from Europe and came into this land, it began to prosper. They brought in their expertise and they made rules that were to reflect the persecution that they faced out there in Europe. So this is what we went through last week, and I invite you to go back to our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube, type in Revelation 14:1, our ministry, the name of our ministry on top of the chart there, and you will find all our YouTube videos on topics that we've covered in the past. So go back there to find, to look for this, the first part of this presentation, and today we are continuing on from there. So we've come to identify that 1798, that power, the first beast, was coming to an end. But before the end of that power, 1776, was the declaration of independence by this new land, the United States of America, 1776. So just before the end of that first beast was the rise of the second beast. 1776, 1798, General Berthier of France was sent by Napoleon to go up and get that the Pope of Rome, go down to Rome and get the Pope, bring it up to Paris, and there the Pope died. Together with it, the civil power that was given to it by Justinian in 538 AD. So 1798 was the end of that power. But it said in the prophecy that it had a deadly wound, but then it was healed. And we've mentioned in passing that the healing part was fulfilled in 1929 when Mussolini of Italy gave back this civil power to the Vatican to rule its own country, its own state, right there within the city of Rome. It has this Vatican, it's an independent state of its own, and it has its own religious power, which is the control of the Catholic Church worldwide, and then it has its own civil power to control its own state. So you see, that power has been growing again. It has healed from the deadly wound according to prophecy. But then, in conjunction with that is the second beast, the USA of today, which is our topic today. Revelation 13 verses 11 and 12. We'll go back to that. We've gone through this last week. It says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon." Those two horns represent religious and civil freedom. They were persecuted by Rome in Europe, and they were not allowed to worship the God that they wanted. They were controlled by the state. But when they came in here, they made sure that everyone of this land had religious freedom to worship however you want to worship, and also to have the right, the freedom to speak, the civil freedom to do whatever you want as long as you are within the law. So those are the two things that is represented by the two horns of the lamb. And it says that this lamb spake as a dragon. Today we will find out, dig more into this beast. Verse 12, it says, "And he exercises all the power of the first beast." We went through that last week. All the power of the last beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. So this second beast, even though it fled away from that first beast, from the persecution of the first beast, come a time that it will exercise the same power, the same persecuting power of the first beast. And also, it will cause or force the whole world to worship that first beast again. So it has changed from the lamb-like to be speaking like a dragon. So from running away from a power that it did not like to forcing the whole world to worship that same power that it ran away from. You see the contrast in this second beast that came out of the earth. We will just quickly have a look at what the Washington Examiner wrote about the Trump accomplishments in 2017. We know that Trump came into power at the end of, he was elected into office at the end of 2016, and in January 2017, the administration, new administration took over from the Obama administration. Washington Examiner made these observations in 1 year the Trump administration has accomplished. Let's have a look at, these are only 9 of it, numbers into the hundreds. But let's look at what Washington Examiner think were the top 9 accomplishments by this new administration. First, President Trump made judicial appointments. He shattered an all-time record earlier this month when Senate confirmed his 12th federal appeals court nominee, marking the only time in history a U.S. president has made more than 11 appellate appointments during his first year in office. So this was one of the accomplishments that the Examiner's Review thought was really telling in this new administration. It broke the record of judicial appointments. 12 appellate judges together with 1 Supreme Court judge. You remember Judge Gorsuch. So that was the first one. Second, just recently, tax reform. Very few political strategists thought Trump could pass a bill earlier this fall after congressional Republicans failed to fulfill their promise of repealing and replacing Obamacare. As soon as this administration came into office, they promised America that they will remove Obamacare. They did not succeed. They did not succeed in that. So when they were pushing for this new tax reform, they gave it very little chance. But they managed to push this bill through with some adjustments. And today, the tax reform is in place. And most companies and even individuals are happy with this new tax reform. Stricter messaging by Trump and the threat of entering midterm year with one major legislative victory led to the president's signing of Tax Cuts and Job Acts of December 22. This President Trump, is known for his negotiating skills. He's beginning to speak. So even though majority of his own Republican Party did not like him, they had to follow suit by passing this tax reform bill because of the threat of oncoming election in 2018, this year. Every 2 years there's the election. So those who are going to be in that election this year were threatened that you may lose your seat if you don't vote for this tax reform. So they had to do and pass. It went through Congress and it has become law. Third, individual mandate repeal. I didn't write down the details here, but this is regarding the insurance in the Obamacare, the insurance of Obamacare. Even though it was not passed, what this administration did was to go for that insurance, the individual mandate, and it repealed that part of the tax of the insurance law. So if you can remember correctly, in 2016 tax, if you were not insured, you were penalized. The government penalizes you. So that was the result of the Obamacare. Obamacare forces everyone to buy insurance. If you don't, at the end of the year you'll be penalized in your tax returns. So this administration repealed that law and that was removed. So expect not to be penalized if you don't have any insurance this time around. The fourth law was deregulation. Companies all over the nation complain about so much regulation that it's affecting their bottom line. So regulation is the fourth accomplishment that the Trump administration was able to achieve. Trump promised during his campaigns that in every regulation he was going to put in place, he was going to remove 2. That was during his campaign. But in these past 12 months, he went well beyond that. You know what he was able to achieve? For every 1 new regulation he put into place, he removed 22. So it's not 1 to 2, but 1 to 22. So he 20 times or 10 times more. That was another achievement that this administration. Why are we looking at all this? The thing is, we are studying about the USA, their second beast. What is happening within this country, within this state, that will help it fulfill the prophecies that we've studied. 2 things in Revelation 12 that we know that it will do. And one is to make everyone worship the first beast. One is that. And the second is everyone will be penalized for not worshiping that first beast. So we have to look within this nation and see what is going on that will enable this nation to do such a thing, to force the whole world to bow down to the first beast. 5, it is cutting government waste. There was so many waste in the big government of the Democratic administration. As soon as this new administration came into place, most of the departments had to cut down on the number of staff. They redeployed them to other areas so that they may be usefully used. So government waste was another achievement that this government had achieved in this first year. Number 6 is travel ban. Remember, it started off with banning those Muslim countries because of the terrorism effect in this country and in Europe. This administration came up with the idea to stop the immigrants coming in from these Muslim countries, and both Democrat and Republican Congress rejected that. They took the bill back and they readjusted. They included North Korea, they included Venezuela and a few other countries, and now that bill cannot be blamed for attacking a certain religion. So that bill was passed. So now they have stopped people immigrating into the country from certain countries, Muslims and communist countries, where they think there's terror. They'll bring terror into the country. So they managed to do that. And that's number 6, travel ban. So you see, number 3, individual mandate. 4, deregulation. 5, government, cutting government waste, and those travel bans from those countries. Number 7, I wanted to detail a little more detail in this because, it comes together with the prophecy. It had this goal of defeating Islamic State. In his campaign in 2016, Trump was continually saying that if I get the presidency, I will wipe out from the face of this earth, wipe ISIS out from the face of this earth. And he's doing just that. So he gave more power to the commanders on the ground. Previous administrations, there was too much power that was held back here, that in Washington, that the commanders on the ground were sort of weakened. Everything has to get the approval from back in Washington. Everything that's happening on the battlefield. So Trump removed that. He said, you make your own decision right there. You know what is right, do it. And today, the major areas that were controlled by the ISIS has been liberated by the US and its allies. So Trump repeatedly credited his decision to ease restrictions on the rules of engagement with the military victory over the Islamic State in these key strongholds this year. When US-backed coalition forces drove Islamic State fighters from their headquarters in Raqqa, Syria in October, the White House highlighted Trump's effort to give commanders on the ground more decision-making authority than his predecessors gave them. The liberation of Raqqa marked a pivotal moment in the war against the Islamic State. He has been targeting the Islamic State, who have been causing trouble all over, wherever they are. They've been a threat to humankind. So Trump is attacking them and giving the commanders on the ground more power to do whatever they think is right. And they are gaining all the areas that had been taken up by ISIS in a very short time. 2 months back, the recognition of Jerusalem. This was one major topic when Trump said that he will support the idea that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. The whole world went after him. He did not care. He just told the world that the USA will move its embassy from Tel Aviv into Jerusalem in recognition that this is the capital of Israel. There was a lot of opposition to this move by the U.S. in the United Nations. And what he did, he removed the funding of the part of the funding that went to the United Nations, and showing the whole world that he means business. So you see, every decision that is made by this government is in fulfillment of the prophecies that we have been studying. This lamb-like beast with two horns is beginning to speak like a dragon. He said, I will remove all those funds if you don't, because of your criticizing me. They laughed at him. They said, you won't do it. And he just did. And now everyone is complaining. How can the UN function when Trump has removed all that fund? And Trump is saying, the US have been funding most of these UN operations. Most of you who are part of the United Nations have not been giving your fair share. So he's saying the truth. That's the very truth. So despite pressures to preserve a status quo that his predecessors had left untouched for decades in Israel, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital, Trump made waves on the international stage this month when he formally recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and announced plans to move the U.S. Embassy from its present location in Tel Aviv. Addressing criticisms of the policy change in a speech earlier this month, Trump questioned why his administration should deny Israel recognition of its capital in an effort to preserve peace talks when years of following that exact strategy had yielded no progress. You see, these are common sense solutions. He's just saying, for years we've been just doing that. We're recognizing, giving in to the Palestinians and other Arab countries for not recognizing Jerusalem. But it hasn't worked. Terrorism seems to thrive everywhere. Israel has been threatened by all the countries, Arab countries. Let's change. Let's recognize Jerusalem. And he did what he said. And today, Jerusalem has been recognized not only by the USA, but other countries are beginning to say, yeah, we should recognize Israel, and if Israel is a sovereign state, it should have a capital, and its capital is Jerusalem. So these are the accomplishments of this administration in the US of A, that second beast, which is accumulating into great power. Those other countries who are the enemies of this state are beginning to recognize, are beginning to shiver, because this giant is beginning to wake up through this new administration. The last achievement that's recorded by the Examiner's Review is the withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. This global warming issue. Trump's decision in June to pull the US out of a sweeping international climate pact drew some of the largest and most pointed criticisms from his liberal detractors to date. Proponents of the climate deal claimed the US would forever lose prestige in the global community if it walked away from the agreement, which former President Obama had negotiated without congressional input. So you see, the past administration had went in and put in this agreement, be part of that agreement, even without the input of the Congress, the American Congress. So Trump says, I'll remove it. The outcome of the battle behind closed doors in the West Wing was viewed at the time as a major victory for the nationalist wing of the White House staff. So even within the White House, they were at loggerhead. Some were for the pull out from that agreement, but some thought like the Democrats to remain there. But it was seen as a major victory for those who were together with Trump, which had counseled Trump not to cave under pressure to soften his stance. So that's the last achievement that's recognized by the Examiner's Review for the first year of this administration's rule. So those are the 9 top achievements. Okay, so major victories in 2017 by this administration. Trump or his administration are using common sense solution to win. They're just using common sense. There's no, even us, common people, will be able to understand. They said, see, these people are attacking Israel, let's remove the fund that is going to them. We cannot be funding our enemies, you see? And he removed the funds, and no more attack on the enemies. So you see, no more attack on Israel. This is exactly, it's just common sense. And they are applying those common sense issues, and people are beginning to be behind this administration, because what they are seeing is very tangible. They are viewed as being decisive. People are experiencing tangible effects, like employment. When Trump went over into individual companies from the US that have taken their operations overseas, he went to them personally and talked to them and told them, promised them of the tax. Even before this tax reform was passed in Congress, most of these companies have already brought in their operations, and they've already promised that they will put in billions of dollars into the country. So the tax reform bill was just a part of that work that Trump had already done by going over and negotiating a better deal for them so that they can bring their operations back into the country. So very simple common sense. If they were complaining about the tax, he promised them, okay, I'll remove the tax. And that's exactly what he did, you see. Common sense solutions. Truth is beginning to grow despite the left media effort to downplay it. So the truth, people are going back to work. Big companies are paying bonuses to their workers. These are tangible things. We are seeing it, and people, the population are feeling it. So they can't be, even if they hate Trump, they can't be saying that he's a fake, because things are happening that they like. So you see that very slowly the people will come to support this kind of leadership, because it brings back peace, it brings back wealth, it brings back the children. Things are beginning to happen in this country that they have not seen for some time. So major victories have been accomplished by this administration in the 1 year or the 12 months that they've ruled. And now let's look at this part of the prophecy, and it says, and he spake as a dragon. This little lamb with 2 horns will speak like a dragon. When did this little lamb or this lamb-like beast come into being? 1776, the Declaration of Independence, that year, 1776. Today is 2017. That's 161 or something years. So this is a very young nation represented by that lamb. It's young, lamb-like beast, which begin to speak like a dragon. This young nation is beginning to frighten the whole world because of the power it has. Economic, military, and even more. So, for an example, just lately, this news about the nuclear button. This is what President Trump tweeted. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un just stated that the nuclear button is on his desk at all times. That's what Kim Jong-un said in the media. Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I too have a nuclear button? But it is a much bigger and more powerful one than his. And also, my button works, his doesn't. So you see, you do not hear any of this kind of rhetoric from past presidents. But the nation, this lamb-like beast, is speaking as a dragon. It's not, it's Trump. That's the way he speaks. That is just normal self. He's not trying to pretend. The Kim Jong-un talked about his button. He said, I have a much bigger button, and my button works. You have to find out whether it works or not. So the dragon, that lamb-like beast is beginning to speak as a dragon. Let's look further into the military budget. That's the website that you'll find this article in. The U.S. military budget is $824.6 billion. That's the budget for fiscal year 2018, for this year, which covers the period October 1st, 2017 through to September 30th in 2018. So that period, that's the budget, $824.6 billion. Military spending is the second largest federal government expenditure after Social Security at $1 trillion. U.S. military spending is larger, this is very interesting, is larger than the next 9 countries combined. So you're talking about China, you're talking about Russia, you're talking about Japan, Germany. 9 of the next 9 high spending nations on the military, you combine them, it won't reach 824.6 billion. That's how much this country has put into the military. And remember, the prophecy, it says that this nation will force the whole world with this kind of budget. Yes, maybe this is the way that it will force the whole world through its military. So, you see, $824.6 billion. That money is divided into 4 components. Let's have a look at this, because it's telling us some information that ties up with prophecies. That 800 plus billions of dollars budget is divided into 4. There are 4 components. First is the $574.5 billion base budget for the Department of Defense. So the Department of Defense its allocation is $574.5 billion. Second is the overseas contingency operations for DOD, for the Department of Defense, to fight the Islamic State group. So this budget, or this fund, is specifically there to fight ISIS overseas. Anywhere that ISIS is in operation, this fund will be utilized to cut them down. So it has allocated $64.6 billion for the overseas operations, specifically for ICE. For the other operations regarding other countries or other missions, it's from the defense-based budget. But this fund is specifically for ISIS. ISIS. Remember that. The third component is a total of other agencies that protect our nations, this nation. These expenses are 173 billion. They include the Department of Veterans Affairs, the State Department, 27 billion, Homeland Security, 44.1 billion, FBI and Cybersecurity in the Department of Justice, 9.5 billion, and the National Nuclear Security Administration in the Department of Energy, 13.9 million. So you see, the third component involves all those different departments, and a total of 173.5 billion. Let's have a look at the fourth component. The fourth component, the last component of this military budget, is a $12 billion on OCO funds for the State Department and Homeland Security. What is it for? To fight ISIS here in America. So it has special funds for fighting ISIS overseas. This fund, the fourth component, is given to the Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security, for specific reason to fight ISIS here in America. So you see, there's been special concern about ISIS, and it's given special recognition of this group. And also it has allocated these special funds specifically to fight ISIS, both here and abroad. So there's a specific reason for this. And we'll see how this ties up with prophecy. Observation. From the budget, we can safely say that ISIS is the #1 enemy of the U.S. 2, special allocation locally and abroad. And 3, Trump had been heard to say that he will wipe ISIS off the face of the earth. No wonder there's special funding for what? In order to achieve what he had promised. And he's already achieving much out there, because he's already allocated funds and he's already given the power to the local commanders to take certain actions that they see fit while out there in the war zone. So these are some of the observations that we have to be looking at. So the focus is on ISIS. He is achieving quick results as recorded by the media. See, this is by Newsweek. Down here is the URL that will take you to this and the complete article. It says, the US-led coalition and its allies have wrestled almost a third of territory from the Islamic State militant group ISIS because of changes implemented by President Trump and his administration, a senior official, US official said on Friday. So within the last few months, 6 months, they've achieved a lot. They've removed 1/3 of all the territories in the Middle East that's controlled by Islamic State. That is within a few months. They've given the power to the commanders, and they have the funds to use as they like. Secondly, Brett McGurk, the special presidential envoy for the global coalition to defeat ISIS, in a briefing with reporters said that Trump's strategies in the battle against the jihadist group in Iraq and Syria had dramatically accelerated progress in the campaign. So you see, he's given the power to the local commanders to do whatever they think is right. They are the right person to make decisions. Before, in the Obama administration, in past administrations, that decision comes back to Washington. Before they do anything in the war zone, they have to refer to Washington, and Washington will have to give the go-ahead or not. You see, no wonder this terrorism keep growing. Because while they're making the decision here, the terrorists run away or change their venue, and while these poor US soldiers are out there in the field exposing themselves to harm, are waiting for the decisions out here in Washington. That is no more. Well, Trump has given the power to the commanders on the ground. So because of that, a lot has been achieved up there. Revelation 13:12, we'll go back to the prophecy, and it says, and he exercises all the power of the first beast before him. The power that was there in the papal system during the Dark Ages will be exercised by this second beast, the US of A. That's the first thing. And secondly, and causeth the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast. So it will force the whole world to worship the first beast, the papal system of Rome, whose deadly wound was healed. So we can identify which beast is this, because it was once a deadly wound and it healed. And that was in 1929, as we've all mentioned. The wound was healed in 1929. So we can identify and prove that that power is the papal power of Rome. The first beast was a persecuting power. So we will be, if we can identify this first beast, we will be able to know too the type of power that will be exercised by this second beast. It was a persecuting power. It was involved in persecuting a religious group. The true Christians of that time and Islam. True Christians, those who were worshipping on the Sabbath, and those who kept the true teachings of the early Christian era. These were the people that were attacked and persecuted during that 1260 years period, the Dark Ages. Also during that period, the Islamic power from the south came up, and this ended. So this power stopped persecuting the Christians and went after the Islamic power. So that was the time when the Reformation was occurring. The Reformation, see how things happen. This papal power went after the Islamic power that was coming up from the south. And that allowed the Reformation to grow in Europe during the 1500s, when Martin Luther in 1517 nailed that door to that church with his 96 Theses. That was the time that this power was distracted by the power from the south, the Islamic power. So it was persecuting both these two powers at the same time. And it had both state and religious power. So that was the power that existed, the first beast. Let's have a look at what this beast, the second beast, will do. We will need to observe how the USA will be doing the same today. Remember what the first beast did? Let's see what will this power, the second beast of the USA, will be doing. Today, evangelical control of Trump. His success in the 2016 election was mainly because of the support of the evangelicals, the Christian. We will expect to see ISIS being eliminated because he promised that during his campaign, and it's already in the process. If USA was to persecute Christians as well, which Christians? Because the Christians are surrounding President Trump right now. So which Christians will be persecuted? Revelation 13:12 says, them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. So this is Revelation 13:12 are those that won't be persecuted. They will worship the first beast. So the Christians that will worship the first beast, they won't be persecuted. But those who do not want to worship that first beast, these are the Christians that will be persecuted by this second beast. Those who won't, they that will not worship the first beast, will be earmarked for persecution. So it's a very small group of Christians, the true Christians, those who do not want to be misled by the false teachings that this ministry has been highlighting all this time. This is the group that keepeth the commandment of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. They are the ones that will be persecuted by this second beast, or the US of A. So the new focus for US, ISIS will then be wiped off the earth. Trump has already said that, and he's already doing that now. He's wiping ISIS out of the face of the earth. But now there will be a small group, a remnant, who are Christians, but will not bow down to the first beast. So this is the group that will be persecuted. Those group of Christians who will not bow down to the first beast. Remember, the second beast will force the whole world to worship the first beast. And thirdly, that same focus, the US has now had on the now wiped out ISIS, will be diverted to this rebellious group of radicals, of fundamentalists. That same focus that US has now for ISIS, once it wipes out ISIS from the face of this earth, it will turn to those who do not want to bow down to the first beast. That same focus that it did on ISIS will be now focused on this remnant group. Those rebellious group, they will be termed radical. The Pope himself has used the word fundamentalist. He called them fundamentalists, those who want to keep to the Bible. He calls them fundamentalists. So these fundamentalists are the ones that this nation will go out and persecute. Are you ready to be one of those? Or will you just give in and bow down to the first beast? That's the question for us Christians today. How will that be enforced? How will they be identified? By the Sunday law. We will touch on this next week. The Sunday law. How it will come into place right here in America, and it will be enforced right here in this land. And then that same law will be enforced worldwide. By whom? By that second beast, that lamb-like beast that spake as a dragon. That's where we will end today, and I hope we have learned more and use this to know about what is going to happen in these last days. It's going to touch the whole world. So wherever you are, if you are in the United States, or you are in Fiji, or in Europe, or wherever you may be listening to on this recording, this power will come over and will affect you wherever you are. Be ready now. Cling on to Jesus, because He is the only one who will help you go through this hardship. If you have to die, die. He will help you to die in peace. Those are the true martyrs, like John the Revelator, like Stephen the disciple. We will be tested during those days. The second beast is the one that will force the whole world to worship the first beast. Let us pray.